Welcome back to Kenshi. Today, I'm gonna try and break into Narco's trap.
It's Master Chef, not Master Bait.
Anyway, why Narco's trap, you ask? Well, allow me to explain. Due to the Holy Nation's fear and hatred of ancient technology, the Lord Phoenix ordered this dilapidated laboratory to be barricaded so as to prevent would-be thieves and tech hunters from purloining the forbidden knowledge within. But it's exactly that knowledge Ramsay needs to further his dream of one day becoming the Master Chef. But before our hero could reasonably attempt infiltrating Narco's trap, Ramsay would need to learn the way of the ninja.
Believe it!
Stealth would become his middle name, and he would befriend the very shadows themselves. To begin his training as a ninja chef, Ramsay set out into the world, sneaking behind people.
Oh no!
Of course, they'd inevitably discover the strange man crouching behind them and chase him away. Inu had returned and was watching after their camp at High Rock while Ramsay was away. As he ran around, sneaking and being chased, she dutifully put the work in to see the dream of a restaurant become a reality. They'd need building materials for the kitchen, and there was also the research to be done. Meanwhile, out in the desert,
I don't like sand.
Ramsay had finally bitten off more than he could chew. Having been following a small army of starving bandits, he had, of course, ended up being found out following them. The chase was on. Ramsay ran until he spotted a settlement in the distance, and could only pray the people there would help him. As he neared the perimeter and spied the dark armored guards, Ramsay knew his prayers were answered. Hallelujah. Once he was safely in town, Ramsay turned on the nearest—
What? What the fuck?
He'd never wielded a blade in anger before, but now he white-knuckled a katana. Town's guards joined the fight against the looters, defending the peace and order of their town. More of the villains poured into the village at his back. The chef repositioned and held ranks with his newfound allies. Swinging the katana like he'd seen others do before, he crossed swords and landed blows. When his opponent came swinging overhead with a saber, he raised his guard and deflected it away, quickly parrying with a slash to the bandit's side. One by one, the bandits fell, with Ramsay moving on to the next. Having slipped into a martial trance, he swung his sword wildly, taking hits from the bandits' rods in the process. The pain didn't even register as his body dumped its adrenaline into the chef's veins. There was one left, and leaping forward, blade overhead, Ramsay brought it down, cleaving the man's chest in twain, reducing the bandit to a dead heap of flesh on the ground. Falling back to reality, Ramsay took his medical supplies and patched himself up. Seeing the guards chasing the bandits out of town, Ramsay looked around for an inn to recuperate at. As he spoke with the barkeep, the chef learned that they, in fact, had some books on cooking.
Wow!
Ramsay couldn't believe his luck. We quickly bought them and then headed upstairs, finding his bed and getting some well-deserved rest. Once he was well and recovered, the chef set out of town, glad to bring the books back to camp. Upon returning to High Rock, Ramsay called out to Inu and set the books he'd bought on her research bench. Almost immediately she joined him, poring over options of how best to use this knowledge. But this was only the beginning. That evening, Ramsay noticed the harvest was finally ready. They'd finally have green fruit to cook up. But once the harvest had been gathered, we ran into a little problem. You see, cooking stoves need power. We had 2 books left, which, thankfully, was just enough to be able to research wind power. And as soon as it was done, Ramsay laid the foundations for the turbine and set to building it. They didn't have all the materials, so our dynamic duo worked together. Mining the copper, we'd need to wire the electricity. Unfortunately, halfway through the construction and mining process, word came. Bandits were on their way with demands. As the enemy approached, Ramsay and Inu watched carefully, but they spotted 2 groups. One a band of dust bandits, and the other your standard starving ones. Seeing the groups come to blows, the 2 charged in, seizing an opportunity to join forces against the better armed dust bandits. The fighting was fierce, but the dust bandits gradually cut down our allies before turning on Ramsay and Inu. As our heroes switched from attacking to defense, they could only pray and hold out hope that somebody would come to their aid. Ramsay went down, and then Inu was all alone, but her thoughts were interrupted by the rumble of feet from behind her and the battle cries of Holy Nation servants rushing to her aid. They leapt into the fray, and Inu, battered from the fighting and bleeding, withdrew to tend to her wounds. but she couldn't help but watch Ramsay lying unconscious amidst the field of bodies past the scuffle. Thankfully, the fighting ended as quickly as it began, and Inu ran over to Ramsay's side. Seeing to his wounds, she treated him with one of the medkits he'd bought for her. And then, just as he'd done before for her, Inu threw the chef over her shoulder. He weighed a ton, but slowly she moved with him, limping back to town. Finding some beds at a local inn, they both spent time recovering from the wounds they'd suffered in the raid. When Ramsay awoke, he knew their party would need some extra help, after everything they'd been through. Spotting somebody downstairs, the chef got to talking to him, and it turned out he too was a cook. It seemed like destiny. And so, with an upfront payment of cats, Aldrich the Mexican guy joined our party. As they all set off together back towards High Rock, and with Aldrich's help, the cookdom was able to raise the windmill and construct a cooking stove. In no time at all, Ramsay was finally able to, for the first time since leaving home, cook a meal.
Easy!
But there was more technology they'd need before starting the restaurant proper. Ramsay knew what he needed to do. Bidding farewell to Aldrich and Inu, our chef prepared to infiltrate the most well-guarded hoard of ancient technology in the region, Narco's Trap. On our way, we also found out we'd need to shed some clothes to take full advantage of Ramsay's newfound stealthy abilities, so he'd be half-naked sneaking around. As he approached, Ramsay scoped out the area and found a ruined hut to hide at while he did his reconnaissance. But just as he was approaching, who else did he see but a fellow tech hunter? As the skeleton marched forward and came under attack, the chef knew it was now or never. Finding a way around, he snuck into the base, broke past the gate, and entered the lab. Sneaking inside, Ramsay spotted the guards, hulking automatons. Carefully avoiding their paths as they patrolled through the laboratory, Ramsay started looting and breaking into chests. Finding a trove of ancient tech, Ramsay slipped engineering plans and science books into his pack, along with anything else he thought looked valuable. Carefully, our chef made his way up the ramp to the second level and continued looting, packing away the ancient lab's valuables. Ramsay barely avoided the sentries. Watching the patrols move, our ninja chef, clad only in his chef pants, hid between walls as he listened to the automatons move about the abandoned lab. Ramsay found an opportunity and snuck up the final ramp, barely missing one of the robots. Cracking into more chests, Ramsay had to be constantly wary of the ramp. With every clank he heard downstairs, his anxiety shot up. Picking through chests and taking everything valuable looking off the shelves, it wasn't long before Ramsay's pack was laden with high-tech gear, enough to make a fortune off of and propel the cookdom to the next level. With his pack full of AI cores and ancient science books, now the grueling task of breaking out of Narco's Trap laid before him. Waiting and weaving between the security drone's patrols, Ramsay held his position until he saw his opportunity. Just to be safe, our chef waited to hear movement from the sentry below. When none came, he made a break for it. Sneaking back down the ramps, the chef made his brazen escape. But with guards across the street watching the gate, Ramsay couldn't just run out, so he hatched a plan. Sneaking just into view of the guards, Ramsay would drop the gate and make a run for it as soon as he was spotted. Then, as they gave chase, he tried to sneak out of sight, using the building's curve, and lose them, only to give him the old ring around the rosy. Once our chef had broke their sight line, Ramsay'd sneak around the rest of the building. As he reached the gate, Ramsay knew this could be the end of his journey. There were still guards across the way patrolling for intruders. Full of either courage or stupidity, Ramsay broke into a sprint, hoping nobody had spotted him. After a safe distance, he looked over his shoulder and saw he'd gotten away. With a pack full of valuables, Ramsay could finally build up the cookdom, finish his restaurant project, and even dreamt of a chef city. He'd name it Flavor Town. But that is a story for next time.